All right, everyone. Good morning. Friday morning briefing. Friday the 13th, guys. Has anything unlucky happened to either of you? Yeah, I guess your days are a lot younger than mine. I'm trying to think if anything unlucky's happened to me. You could crack a joke here about me being on with you two, but I wouldn't go to those depths, guys. How are you both today?
Yeah, things are good. Looking forward to the game at the weekend. The start of three home games in just over a week. That's really, really exciting stuff. First Saturday at 3 o'clock game, as we were discussing yesterday. That's another exciting thing. Looking forward to being back at Celtic Park and really sampling the atmosphere. And these games against Hearts in particular, they take care of themselves. They're not. I know they're not a derby game, but there always feels like a rivalry between the two sides. They'll always bring a sizable crowd. Celtic will turn up. The Celtic supporters will turn up in their thousands. Should be all set for a good game on Saturday afternoon.
Tony?
Feeling good, nothing unfortunate happened yet, touch wood and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, all good. What's not to look forward to? We've been speaking about it for a wee while, and the next 8 days are just as exciting as it gets, isn't it? A
Yeah.
cracking game against Hearts, the one we all been waiting for on Wednesday night. I know it's a game at a time stuff, and priorities getting 3 points against Hearts, but you cannot help get excited for Wednesday night. It's just the nature of it, isn't it? The competition, finally the chance to maybe sort of do something in a competition, which would be great. And then obviously Falkirk in the League Cup quarter final next Sunday. So as weeks go in football, I think you spoke about it the other day, Hamish. If how much will the Celtic supporters be smiling if they get 3 wins out of three from that lot? Yeah, and by the way, that's not a tall order. I think Celtic should be targeting that anyway. I've got to be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah.
So, I anything less than 3 wins, I'll be pretty disappointed. I've got to be honest. So yeah,
Yeah, 100%. Aye, that's what I was going to say, Tony. Like anything less than three
yeah,
wins, and you are as fans, you're going to beat if we don't beat Bratislava in our opening game, or if we don't beat Hearts tomorrow, or if we like go out of the cup to Falkirk. Any of those three are going to lead to real disappointment and put a bit of a downer and things. But that's Celtic. You're only as
yeah.
good as your last game or your last couple of games. But I have total faith in the team over these next three games that they're going to win all three, and we're going to be on one hell of a high and sent into three kind of challenging away games after that. It's a funny wee run this between the two international breaks. We've got three games at Celtic Park over a week, and then we've got I think St Johnstone away, Borussia Dortmund away, and Ross County away as well. So a couple of kind of challenging domestic away games in the glitz and glamour of Signal Iduna Park. But we can't look to that game yet, guys, can we? Because we've got Hearts tomorrow. Uh,
No, but this is the enjoyable part about covering Celtic. Every game, regardless of who you're playing against, whether it's Hearts at home, Falkirk in the League Cup, Borussia Dortmund, Slovan Bratislava, every game's massive now. From now until the end of the season, every game has a purpose. It's not pre-season anymore. Every game has weight and value behind it. And you're right. You are one win away. You are one draw defeat away from a crisis, but you wouldn't want it any other way because it keeps your interest and it keeps the concentration levels high. You're just desperate to get to the next game. I think we're all in this. I mean, we all had the international break, but even if Celtic weren't playing that great, we would be looking forward to the next game because it's the end of an international break. It just so happens that Celtic are playing some of the best football we've seen in recent years, so that's something exciting to really look forward to over the next week or so. I expect Celtic to score a lot of goals between now and next Sunday. That's my bold prediction. I think goals will be scored. I think
how
strikers will be
many?
scoring. I'm going to go double figures. I'm going to go at least 10 in the next three games. It's early. It's early, but uh, can can you see Celtic beating Hearts comfortably tomorrow with the way that Hearts are at the moment? Yes. Can you see them beating a championship team by a couple of goals a week on Sunday? Yes. Slovan Bratislava, a bit of an unknown quantity, but Celtic Park rocking. Could they get two or three goals against them? I don't think it's out with the realms of possibility that Celtic score a lot of goals in this next week or so.
You've said it now, Ryan. There's no going back. So we'll
Fine with
can
that.
can can we make sure we remember this, Tony? Do not let this go. If we struggled badly. But equally, if we do score double digits, he deserves credit for that. It's a big statement.
I mean double digits on the 3 games, not for just an individual game, by the way. The 3
No,
games
I know that. Don't worry. I know
just
that.
in case.
They gathered that. My big problem is we're going to have to toss a coin to see who drives to Dingwall. Or maybe I just pull Ryan and say, Ryan, you're driving to Dingwall. One of the ones. I'll look in, so we'll decide in due course. Yeah, I mean, listen, Ryan's making that statement because he's very excited about this Celtic team and he's confident about this Celtic team's ability to hit the back of the net with increased regularity. I think you canvass most Celtic supporters, they would probably concur with what Ryan's just said there. In fact, some of them might think that that's a conservative estimate. You know what I mean? So, so there you go. I think the way the team's playing, there's goals in the team and there's goals from all areas. You know, they started the first couple of games of the season and the strikers hadn't even scored. You know, so that gave you real faith and belief in what the manager's telling them was that everybody has to contribute, which is great. Alistair Johnston even got off the mark, you know, so, and all added to the fact that he's in line for a new contract, stuff like that. So there's a real feel-good factor around Celtic Park at the minute, and the players are desperate to make valid contributions, even the ones that are coming off the bench. So I don't think what Ryan said there is as kind of radical as it seems, you know, because what's that? An average of 3 goals a game, just over. So, you know, and the way this team are playing, you've got every faith in them to, as I say, score goals. So 10, over the next 3 games, I think you would back them to do that. But it's fine saying it. Again, go back to it. It's doing it. And Celtic have so far have talk to talk and walk to walk. And we just hope that continues. The international break came along at a time when you were just wanting Celtic to hit the boosters. You know, but conversely, you know, get a chance to kind of regroup, refresh, and just say, right, this is what has gone spectacularly well. If you are saying there's stuff gone wrong, you can tweak that and make it better. But what have they conceded? One goal so far? A thumping header, which nobody's saving. Great delivery from a free kick. You know, you have to hold your hands up and say, you know what? Sometimes teams score good goals. That was a cracking goal that Hibs scored that day. But that apart, they've been pretty flawless. You know, both in attack and defence. So I think everybody has confidence. Whatever team is fielded tomorrow, they've got confidence in them that Celtic will score goals. And all the conditions are right for that, aren't they? Especially tomorrow.
Yeah, evil genius. Looking at the next 6 games, 5 wins and a draw in the next 6 games. Imagine we get that. How good we'll all be feeling going into the next international break. How are we feeling, everyone, just generally about this next chunk? It's been a long old international break, hasn't it? It seems a long time since the derby, I would say. It is only less than 2 weeks, but it seemed a lot longer than that to me anyway. But we're now back and ready to keep going. So how are we all feeling about this next chunk of matches? Let us know. What are we expecting from Hearts tomorrow, guys? Because they're struggling badly. I think they've got 1 point from 4 games so far. I don't even know if I think they've scored 1 league goal. I think they scored against Dundee. Shanklin's not scored a goal yet for them. The pressure is on Stephen Naismith. Are there any fears about tomorrow's game, Ryan?
I've got to be honest, I do expect Hearts to up their game because it seems like they always do against Celtic. I know maybe that's more at home than away from home, but you're always going to be in for a battle when Hearts come to town. It's just that sort of game, and Stephen Naismith will be rallying his troops for that very reason, to make sure that it's as difficult as possible. But I do think that there is a fear factor with Celtic at the moment with teams. I think they realise how strong Celtic are. This is arguably the strongest Celtic have been under Brendan Rodgers, out with the invincible treble season, in my opinion. In terms of the style of football, it's right up there with the invincible treble team of 2016-17. But I think we're only in the early stages, and you're going to see that evolve and develop over the season. It's quite exciting to think of where this team can go in a couple of months, because we're only in the middle of September at the moment. We're going to have so much. Proof with all of these games coming up, both in the Champions League, League Cup, and the Premiership as well. So I do expect Hearts to up their game, because they're better than what they're showing currently. They made some good signings in the summer. So for whatever reason, they're underachieving in the league. They got that good result against Rangers, which arguably they could have won. I watched that game and they could have won against Rangers if they took their chances. But they've lost every other game. And especially the game against Dundee, which I watched on Premier Sports, they were absolutely thumped. Dundee could and should have scored a lot more than the 3 that they got in the first half. So Naismith is under pressure, but I do expect them to up their game, because that's just what Hearts do. They'll bring a big crowd tomorrow, an expectant crowd that will be wanting something, something to cling on to for the season. They've got the European football, of course, and the Conference League. It was unlucky that they got put out the Europa League, but they need to get their league form back on track, or any sort of form. But I just think if Celtic turn up and play the way that we know that they can play, then there's only going to be one winner tomorrow. And if Celtic play anywhere near their best, then they'll get a couple of goals against this Hearts side, because they are a Hearts side that are feeling sorry for themselves at this moment in time. And the start of the season has not been good whatsoever. So it's up to Celtic to sort of reopen some of those maybe closed wounds over the international break, and really make them think about how badly they've started the season, really.
I think if we get an early goal tomorrow, like we have in a lot of games, that could be really important, because Hearts are going to be fragile confidence-wise, a bit like Hibs were. And we scored really early goals in both games against Hibs. And all right, we didn't really go on to batter Hibs in either game, but you could see that tomorrow. The thing I was thinking about Hearts, and they've obviously struggled so far this season, Tony, but like you look at Aberdeen last season, who struggled generally, but gave us some really tough games when they actually played us, because they had quality players, the likes of Miovski and McGrath and Clarkson and players like that. Hearts are obviously struggling at this point, but you can't deny that they still have, in relative terms to Scottish football, quality players. Shankland is a quality player at Scottish football level. I think Danda is a really good player. Blair Spittle. There will be others there. They have a good squad on paper. So I guess that's something maybe we still need to keep that in mind tomorrow, that they do have quality, and you can't be slacking in any way.
Listen, the question was, what do you expect from Hearts? They are well capable of giving you a bloody nose. That you always have to be mindful of that. But I think Celtic have to just grasp the nettle here. What is it the manager said last season? Apply scoreboard pressure. Come tomorrow, Celtic could be 8 points clear of Rangers. And the pendulum swings back, the pendulum of pressure swings back to Rangers to go to Tannadice to close it back to 5, and it becomes a must win. Celtic have to take every opportunity that they get to widen this gap, and also be aware of the challenge from Pittodrie and Aberdeen. It'll be interesting to see if they can keep winning. So, but I think in terms of Hearts, Hearts need something to cling on to, and they'll come and they'll play the way Hearts play, but Celtic have found ways around that more often than not, and I think certainly tomorrow they'll find a way around it. I don't think anybody in the stadium will care about the pressure that the opposition manager's under. I think they'll just want Celtic to be as ruthless as they can and try, as you say, get that early goal and put themselves in a comfortable position, which they have been doing in a lot of games in the first half. Not so much taking their foot off the pedal, but game management and stuff like that. But I think tomorrow, given the chance and Celtic can put Hearts to the sword, they will take it. I think those are desperate. They're just coming into their stride. Ryan alluded to that. Where can this team go? And I think the managers maybe been saying that to them as well. We can be more ruthless. We can be more clinical. And I think that's what you want. That's what he'll deem as progress and improvement and development as we're going along. So I think tomorrow's one of those games where if Celtic can get ahead early, I don't think there'll be any kind of let up. Hamish, I think it's that performance that we want, that full 90-minute performance to take you into the next stage of your development, which is playing at the elite level in club football. So I think Celtic will want the perfect warm-up. So I think they will go hell for leather tomorrow, and I don't think as much as they want to, Hearts will be able to do anything about it.
Yeah, you mean you'd back us to get an early goal in tomorrow's game? I mean, you would look at that and think, Celtic first 10 minutes, first 15 minutes, can we score? And you think it's probably more likely than not based off the last month. I just wonder if the game on Wednesday might prevent us from seeing that 90-minute performance. I just wonder if we're a few goals up, if Brendan Rodgers might. Well, I think he certainly, if we're a couple of goals up, will bring on a few of the new guys. I don't personally think any of them will start. I could be wrong. Maybe Engels will start. I feel like he might continue with the midfield that started the derby. I think Ralston might start, just based off Alistair Johnson's situation. We'll find out later from Brendan Rodgers what the story is there. Carter Vickers, people have forgotten maybe that he had a bit of an issue at the end of the derby, didn't he? And he was seen after the game with that kind of protective boot on. So again, we don't know if Carter Vickers will play tomorrow. I know the reports were that he would be fine, but again, we'll need to wait and see what Rodgers is saying. A few people asking about the referee. Colin Stephen, I believe, is the referee tomorrow. Frank Connor, Callum Spence assisting him. Alan Muir is on VAR. So that should be interesting. Anything else in tomorrow, Ryan?
I'm just thinking, there's not been that much talk. There will be more talk today, and there is actually a piece that I put on the website about Austin Trusty. I was speaking to a Sheffield United expert. That's on the website if anyone wants to check it out. The video will also be live at 12 p.m. At midday on the good and the bad of Austin Trusty. I think we've heard a lot about some of his negatives in his game, but there's plenty of positives there to take as well. I just think there could be a potential chance for him to start tomorrow. He didn't have any. I don't think he got any game time with the USA over the international break. So I'm just wondering when's the best time to not unleash him, but put him in the starting lineup. Is it that game against Falkirk? Have we earmarked that game in particular to play maybe all four of them in that game? McCowan, Bailly, Trusty and Engels. I think the most likeliest one to start would be Engels because, he's your £11 million signing. I want to see a bit more of him. But at whose expense? This is the problem that I've got because Hatate started the season really well, but he was the weakest out of the three, as Tony was saying. We were speaking before we went on air, and he was the weakest out of the three, even though he had a good game against Rangers, in my opinion, although he was slack with a couple of passes. I think it would be extremely harsh if you take Paulo Bernardo out of this team at present because the football that he's playing both on and off the ball is so pivotal to the way that Celtic are playing. Celtic have went up a level since Bernardo's came into the team properly the past couple of games because his pressing is ridiculous and his interceptions are so good and they're really causing teams a lot of hassle and stress whenever they're on the ball. I want to see that. I think everybody wants to see Arne Engels, the £11 million signing. We got a wee glimpse of him, some of the good stuff of his game, some of the more agricultural things of his game when he actually ripped the guy's shirt off to bring him down to the ground. That'll be important in Europe, as I've discussed previously. I just want to see more of this player. You just get the vibe that tomorrow could be his sort of day to really announce himself as a Celtic player. But he's not the only one, and Brendan Rodgers could throw a couple of curveballs in there as well, but it's exciting. I think we're all looking forward to seeing that team line come out an hour and 15 minutes before the game because I think there could be a couple of surprises. There might not be, but even if there isn't, that bench will still look very, very strong.
I think that defensively, I wouldn't be changing stuff for the next two matches in terms of Trusty and Vai. I would be looking at the Falkirk game for those both as they're starting. I just think, with these two big games, and especially with Wednesday night coming up, and given how well like Scales and Taylor played in the derby, I'd be looking to keep that the same. That's just my opinion. Brendan Rodgers' opinion might be different. I guess in the more attacking areas, Tony, it might be a bit different because you don't kind of rely on that consistency and relationships and all that kind of stuff. So maybe, I wouldn't be shocked if Engels started tomorrow, to be honest.
He's got one decision. Engels to come in for Hatate if that's the change he's going to make. The rest should stay as is.
For Hatate, you're saying?
Yeah. If that's who's going to drop out of the midfield and he wants to play Engels, it has to be Hatate, doesn't it?
Do you think Engels and Bernardo would work? I just get a feeling maybe they're a little bit similar and you kind of need variation in the midfield.
You'll find out, won't you?
Yeah.
You'll find that out. But and I'm not necessarily saying the manager will do it. I just think Engels has been brought for a reason, and that's to play in the Champions League. So for me, he's an automatic starter on Wednesday, and I think he'll come on tomorrow. But I just think that the players that have got Celtic thus far will start. I don't think you want to be tinkering about too much with it, certainly domestically, but he has a game plan for the Champions League, which will see him completely wrap that up because you can't play like that. Well, you want to see if you can play like that the way you can play domestically and transition it into the Champions League, but there will be tweaks in the team. But you talk about not looking too far ahead. That there's no doubt in my mind that Celtic will have been focusing on both these games this week. The manager's thorough, and and people talk about, you can't overload players with too much information. I liken it to American footballers. Look at the amount of plays that they have to learn and the information overload that they get. So players can learn to play 2 games in the space of days in 2 different systems and do lots of different stuff. So I don't think, and outwardly Celtic would never admit it, Rodgers would never admit it, because the next game is the one that you focus on, yada, 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 that's your next challenge, that's the most important game. But the most important game's on Wednesday night, isn't it? Let's be honest. Celtic need to get their campaign off to a flyer, their Champions League phase campaign off to a flyer, but Hearts is first. So that's why I don't think he'll make too many changes for the Hearts game to what's gone before in terms of domestic, the way they perform domestically. So I just think the big question is, if Engels comes in, who drops out the midfield? And for me, based on the Rangers game per se, it would be Hatate, but I'd quite love to drop Hatate because he's had no bad start to the season. You know what I mean? But you're spending 11 million quid on a guy, he's not going to sit there on the bench. But I think he's been brought in for a reason, and that reason is Europe. Because the rest of the team, as you say, has functioned a lot, hasn't it? And functioned fine.
Yeah.
So I think Trusty will have to wait, but I think they'll maybe see some game time with Wednesday night in mind.
Yeah. I think they could come on tomorrow. I think there's a fair chance you see, if a couple of goals up, you see Vi and potentially Trusty comes on for Carter Vickers. If Carter Vickers isn't ready to start, Trusty will start next to Liam Scales, which would be very interesting because we know generally how we seem to struggle without Carter Vickers. So that could be a bit of a baptism of fire for Trusty. We'll find out later from Brendan Rodgers. Just a few comments. Celt88 saying Austin needs to trust the process. His time will come. Yep, fantastic. Chilpel can't drop Bernardo. It'd be harsh on anyone at the moment not to be in that midfield. Steve pointing out, this is quite an interesting point. McCowan cannot play against Falkirk as he's cup-tied. He must have played for Dundee in an earlier round. Thanks for that, Steve. What time was Brendan Rodgers' press conference today? Smell the glove is wondering.
1:30.
Do you guys know?
Yeah, half one, I believe. So we'll get the sound bites out of that, and then the video will come out a couple of hours later. But I'm sure we'll find out pretty quickly about both Cameron Carter-Vickers and Alistair Johnston. Hopefully they're both fit, especially for both. They're both equally as important. But I just think on the attacking side of things, Alistair Johnston has been absolutely immense the past 2-3 games. The talk about him getting a new contract is not before time. He deserves to be one of the highest earning players at the club. He's that important. He's already a leader within Celtic. It's clear that his teammates love him. He clearly keeps the tempo up with the way that he plays. I've watched that assist so many times to Daisen Maeda, and it's brilliant. Sometimes, every time I watch it, I'm like, is he going to get to the byline to get that ball into the box? He does. He gambles and he gets his just rewards because Robin Tropper slips ever so slightly. But yeah, I've been very, very impressed by Alistair Johnston recently. I think he's went up a level from what he was last season. The acid test is the Champions League, of course, but I've got my money on him to succeed there too.
Yeah, another thing I wanted to just talk about was some quotes from Owen Hargreaves. A bit interesting to hear Owen Hargreaves speaking about Celtic. Did you guys reckon he was promoting TNT coverage or something like that ahead of
Yeah, would have been.
Yeah.
the Champions League? But he's just been speaking generally very positively about all things Celtic and Brendan Rodgers, and he reckons that we could have Scottish football's first £40 million player. At some stage, he's talked up Arne Engels. He says Rodgers is not going to mess with Engels when they've invested that level of money. Celtic have done a good job on transfers. He praised the Japanese model as well. And he reckons the new format might of the Champions League might help us going forward because we don't have to necessarily play a big team home and away. So yeah, any thoughts on Owen Hargreaves talking about Celtic, Tony?
To be fair to Owen Hargreaves, whenever he has spoken about Celtic on Champions League coverage, he's always been very fair.
Yeah, I think
He's
so.
always been able to extrapolate himself from it and look upon it in purely footballing level. And I've always enjoyed Owen Hargreaves talking about Celtic, and I think he's enjoyed playing at Celtic Park himself. He's spoken about that in the past, and but he's always been kind to Celtic, and he's always tried to give some sort of counterbalance to people just having a go at Celtic and saying, "Oh, they get beat again," or their record's terrible. But he's always brought some kind of perspective to it and said, "Look, this is a cracking club with a great support, a great history, but they're fighting against heavyweights." So whenever he talks, I kind of tend to listen because I think he's one of the better analysts on the Champions League coverage, and he's fair.
I
He's fair
agree,
to
yeah.
a club like Celtic because he understands their standing in European football and where they want to go, and he's always kind, and I don't. It's no surprise that he's speaking highly of Brendan Rodgers and Celtic because, as I say, I don't know if he has any kind of Celtic leanings or anything, but he's always batting for Celtic in that environment because he's played in it and he knows it's unforgiving, and he knows that Celtic are doing their best again. Originally in the Champions League groups stages, that they were competing against some real heavyweights, and it was slanted very heavily against them. And he always made that point. I found some of the pundits that were on that were pretty cruel on Celtic and pretty unkind. On Hargreaves saw last year the fine margins. Lots of them were just, talking about, they get beat again, deplorable record, this, that, and the next thing. But it was Owen Hargreaves that kind of made a case for Celtic. And as I say, when he's on a panel and he's talking about Celtic, I think he's pretty fair with Celtic. So I'm pleased to hear him continue in that vein. And a lot of other people should listen to him, I think, as well. Got to be honest.
Yeah, I don't mind him. He spoke positively after that 0-0 game back in, I think, 2003 or whenever it was. Yeah, one of my kind of more preferred English pundits, a bit different from the likes of Michael Owen and guys like that. Right, just Paul just asking what's the script with James McCarthy. Let's just start this once and for all, guys. Why does no one, and I mean no one, ask the manager directly? Is it because people are told not to ask the question? It's very odd. I get why it might seem like that, Paul. I guess to an extent it maybe is interesting that James McCarthy hasn't come up. My own take on it would be that it's just not relevant anymore. James McCarthy is not at Celtic. He has not been at Celtic for at least a year. He's on some sort of gardening leave or something like that. We clearly can't find another club for him, but I think it's very obvious that James McCarthy isn't really anything to do with Celtic anymore. He's obviously not training. He hasn't been training for well over a year. He is nowhere to be seen in anything the squad do or any places that they go. So yeah, I guess it is maybe interesting. Rodgers hasn't been asked about it, but it's probably not massively relevant. Do you guys have anything to add?
Not really, to be honest. We've only seen bits of him, bits and bobs, and even then, from early doors, I didn't think it was a great fit for Ange Postecoglou's style of play. Always looked a bit rigid when he was in the midfield whenever he played. it's just a shadow of the player that he was, because he was this combative midfielder for Everton and Crystal Palace. Less so with Crystal Palace than Everton, but remember the player that was at Hamilton that broke through along with James McCarthy, and then he got that, I think it was a £13 million move to Everton, and he was so good up until his injury, which was really, really unfortunate. A player that I always wanted to see play for Celtic, and I'm glad that he did get that opportunity, but it was too far down the road, unfortunately. If we'd have got him 5-6 years earlier, I've got no doubt in my mind that he would have been a star player for Celtic, but injuries catch up with him, wear and tear of a season, and he just couldn't fulfil the roles that would have been required of not just a Celtic midfielder, but an Ange Postecoglou Celtic midfielder, which was even more, demanding than before. I think the writing was on the wall very early that it wasn't going to be the greatest fit between the two parties. So, yeah, it's a shame the way it's worked out, but not every transfer works out. It's just, at least it's good that Celtic have had so much joy in the midfield recently with, the likes of Hatate, Matt O'Reilly, the new breed coming in the form of Bernardo and Engels and McCowan as well. It's not a problem area. It's just it's just one of those side note things that gets brought up every once in a while. Shame the way it's worked out, but I think both parties have moved on and well moved on by now.
Liam Shaw, probably another one, Tony, because he's officially still at the club, but he clearly isn't because he was nowhere to be seen in pre-season. So Celtic quietly moved these guys on, and there's not a song and a dance made of it.
And what's there to be said? They've moved on. And also as well, just to address the fact that I've been a journalist for nearly 28 years, 29 years. I've never been told you can't ask a question.
It doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. I never went into a press conference situation or someone said to me, by the way, you can't ask that. It's never happened. I work in the premise that you're going to speak to adults, and adults can choose to answer your question if they want or not. So it's this kind of thing that you're scared to ask. Journalists are scared to ask questions or whatever. There's some kind of agenda. Nah, I'm speaking purely for myself, but many other journalists would concur. I've never been told before I went into a press conference, don't ask that. Never had questions vetted. I've just always asked them. And as I say, people are adults in the room. They can choose to answer them or they can choose not to. It's up to them.
Yeah, again, putting myself into a journalist's shoes who'd be at the press conference, I guess it would almost be a bit of a strange thing to ask all this time down the line today if they asked about Brendan Rodgers. I mean, what answer would you get from Brendan Rodgers anyway? Like, James McCarthy clearly isn't going to be starting for Celtic tomorrow. He clearly hasn't been in the picture for well over a year. The last time I saw or heard of James McCarthy was at the Player of the Year not the end of last season, but the end of the season before when Ange Postecoglou was in charge. So I don't know. We don't know exactly what the story is, whether maybe his injury issues have continued to happen. I'd say there's a fair chance that no other club has wanted to maybe take on the wage that he had at Celtic. So he isn't in the picture. He'll be out of contract if he still is in contract at the end of this season. And that'll be that. I just wanted to tackle that because it's a thing that comes up quite often. As I say, I totally understand why it comes up because I guess as fans we expect to see Celtic telling us everything and statement to go out, he's no longer with the club. But a lot of the time that just doesn't happen. McCarthy, Shaw, perfect examples. Anything else, guys? You'll be back later, both of you, won't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be reacting to the press conference. Just on that point about McCarthy and the need for transparency, I think that it would go a long way if Celtic were to release a retained list at the end of the season. I know they maybe do their business differently from other clubs, but I would like to know, right, players are at the end of their contract and you've got that document there so you know what players are going to be there and not, rather than guessing and then finding out a couple of months later that they've joined another club.
Remember there was the Scott Bain stuff and Celtic never put out a statement about Scott Bain signing a new contract. But if you go onto Scott Bain's page on the website, it says Scott Bain signed a new contract in so-and-so, like the last kind of year or whatever. And the club never put that out for whatever reason. So I guess that's a separate issue, guys.
Yeah, he signed that new deal and then he made that mistake at Easter Road, I think, all within 24 hours. So I don't know if they wanted that or not. socials.
Okay.
I remember he literally dropped the ball into the net against Hibs at Easter Road. So I think everybody knows that he's a dependable option, third option for Celtic. So, I don't think anybody had any problems with him being in and around the team. But I just think a retained list, and I think it would go a long way to solving some of these issues. And it would mean that people would stop talking about players like James McCarthy, because there's not been any official confirmation that he's left the club or anything like that. All people ask for is transparency in these situations.
Yeah, that would be nice. Right, guys, happy to head off at this stage. I'll enjoy my weekend. You guys will be hard at work all weekend, but you love doing it, don't you? It's always easier when you're talking about Celtic being good, and hopefully that's the case tomorrow. You'll be back later on in the day. Check that out, everyone. Enjoy your weekend, everyone. I'll catch you on Monday. Speak to you then.